Mythologist, best-selling author, and screenplay writer Anand Neelakantan's latest book, Valmiki's Women, Five Tales from Ramayana, looks anew at the mothers, the sisters, the wives, and the lovers who hold complex epic together. The versatile writer and entrepreneur Koral Dasgupta is currently engaged in writing the Sati Series, comprising interpretive narratives on Ahalya, Kunti, along with books on Draupadi, Mandodari, and Tara. Author and historian Ira Mukhoty's Song of Draupadi is a symphony of Draupadi's voice and those of the other women around her. In conversation with Malashri Lal, writer, academic, who has also co-authored iconic works such as In Search of Sita and Finding Radha, they speak of their books and the resonance they find with readers. Mughal 10 today has a lot of things going for women, the stronger gender, and stay for this session as well as others. All yours.
Good afternoon, friends. It's indeed a great delight to be here at the Mughal tent and on a session that looks at epic women. I have a great panel. Looking forward to our discussions. Just by way of preliminary remarks, I want to mention that the epics have come in for a great deal of discussion and rewriting, revisiting, looking at contemporary relevance. And this has all happened in the last 8 to 10 years in particular. It's happened not only through books and talks, but also on media and on film. And the panel that we have today will be looking at that entire range of written and performance arts when we examine what is happening with the epic women. So I'm going to start with Ira Mukhoty to begin, just to begin the questions rolling. Ira has a novel which is called Songs of Draupadi. So much has been written about Draupadi, so I was wondering what new will I find. I found plenty new. One of those is that Krishna does not appear in your novel during the dice scene and the famous episode when there is an attempt to disrobe Draupadi. And I looked up a lot of other reference works, and as a historian, Ira has a reasons for not putting Krishna there at that point. So it in a way goes against our popular assumptions about that particular part of the Mahabharata story. So over to you, Ira. Why did you keep Krishna away?
Thank you so much, Malashri. A slightly contentious question to begin with, putting me on the spot. But when I started my research around the whole writing of the epic of the Mahabharata through the voices of its women, because I do cover about a dozen of the women in addition to Draupadi, though she is very much the central figure. So I started to do some research and I came across Iravati Karve's great Yuganta, which she wrote in the 70s. And looking at some of the work that she had done for Yuganta, she explains that, as many of you will know, the Mahabharata is an epic that was conceived over centuries, initially in the oral form. So people would tell stories, there would be poetry, somebody would add some folk episodes, somebody would add some drama of their own. And then with the years, there would be philosophical digressions being added to by essentially Brahmins who would try to explain some of the main happenings, main events in the Mahabharata. So this is a very unwieldy, massive text which exists for us to look at. And sometime in the 1930s, a group of scholars in Pune decided to look very critically at the text of the Mahabharata as it existed in Sanskrit, and look at the various areas of overlay. So if you get a version from the south, if you get a version from somewhere else, if you get a version from some slightly unknown source, you look at the words used, you look at the phrase used, and you overlay all of these renditions, and you try and find a common sort of source, and that they figured would take you to the so-called original story. before all the later digressions were added onto it. So if you look at the critical, this is called the critical edition. It is not a complete work, and some scholars are not entirely happy because they feel if you remove all the storytelling, if you remove the poetry, then the beauty of the Mahabharata is lost. But nonetheless, it's very useful for someone like myself who's trying to get to the crux of the story to see what were the intentions of the original songwriters, what were they trying to say, what was their story. And if you look at the critical edition, many of the divine elements are missing from the story. All the very famous episodes we have do not actually exist in this critical edition. And when you look at the character of Krishna, how he's portrayed to us, I began to feel that he is less a divine person and more a 21st century politician. He's scheming, he's manipulating, he's deceitful, he lies, he manipulates people, he knows their weaknesses and he uses them. For example, where Draupadi is concerned, we are told he is her great Sakal, the person she can rely on above all else. And yet, when unknown to her, he is actually offering Draupadi as an incentive to Karna and saying, join our side, join the Pandavas. You will have Draupadi as a wife. Who more beautiful and enticing than Draupadi? And this is the Draupadi who has gone to Krishna to ask her to fight for her honor, and he is going behind her back and doing this. So I realized that possibly the Krishna of the epics is not the same as the Krishna of the Gita Govind and the Harivansh. Other scholars have postulated this, that these are actually two different people who have become amalgamated to become the one Krishna we know. So that is why, to come to your question, I have decided to show Krishna in all his flaws, warts and all.
Yes, that's quite an eye-opener, because when Namita Gokhale and I wrote the book on Radha, we were looking at Krishna of the Gita Govinda, which is a very different kind of a character, really. Let me turn to Anand Neelakantan. With all the wonderful script writing and, of course, your own authorship of books, this particular book on Valmiki's women, where you have looked at 5 women and many of them not at the center stage of the usual Ramayana stories. Many of them are women who've been reviled by culture. And you have created a very compassionate, insightful, sympathetic perspective in your version. I particularly want to refer to Manthara. We have always seen Manthara as this evil hunchback who incites Kekai into asking for those boons, which leads to the terrible confrontation and the war. But you've shown Manthara with her vulnerabilities. You've shown her as a victim rather than a villain. So I don't want to reveal too much, but I do want to ask you, what made you turn towards this kind of a sympathetic portrait? Manthara, Taraka Raktashi, Shurpanakha, Kekai. So are you overturning the popular disregard and criticism of these women characters, or is there an alternative story in the sources?
Thank you. It's great being here after 2-3 years, perhaps. Last time I came was with all the film stars for Bahubali launch of the book. Thank you. See, this is a part of Valmiki's Women is a part of the series of books I have been writing right from Asura. Starting from Ravan's perspective, then Ajaya, Duryodhana's perspective, then in Vanara, Bali's perspective. So it's a part of the series which I have been writing. So I've always looked at every character in Ramayana or Mahabharata very sympathetically. And I find that my sources are mostly folk sources, especially from the south. So it has been always portrayed, all these characters. I come from Kerala, basically, where this kind of tradition is very, very rich. We are the people who celebrate an Asura, Mahabali. And not Ramarajya, but Mahabali Rajya is the ideal. So this kind of poetries have been always written right from 14th century, 15th century to recent times in Malayalam, in Tamil and many other languages. So the Manthara's portrayal, only thing is you are doing it in English, basically. Manthara, not just Manthara, Tadaga also. One of the characters in the book is Tadaga. So one pertinent point here is the Tadaga didn't go to Ayodhya to create trouble. Ayodhya came to Tadaga, right? The rishis came to Tadaga's place and they wanted to do sacrifice. And what was sacrifice? It's not the Gandhiji's sacrifice we are talking about. The sacrifice was about sacrificing animals. And Tadaga is an Yaksha actually, to really see. And Yakshas are tree spirits. The tree spirits are the ones who are protecting the animals. There itself is a conflict. Not just in Ramayana, Mahabharata also is a conflict. What is Indraprastha? It is a conflict of today. The civilization moving to the forest, the god telling his disciple to shoot everything that flies, that crawls, that runs, burn down the forest so that the development will come. Doesn't it resonate today? So my mantra is not the mantra, not just the mantra of Ramayana. Mantra is any servant at our home, in our middle class, upper class home. How do we treat them? So it all comes from, none of my stories are really Ramayana or Mahabharata. They are today's story. When I write Bahubali, when I write Vanara, when I write Asura or Ajaya, they are today's story. It is today's India I am talking about. My books are political. My books talk about today's problem. So mantra is a mantra of Ramayana. At the same time, mantra is the one among us, the invisible one in our middle class homes, in our upper class homes. So when I am raising Mantra's question, it is a question which I raised to the society itself. We have made some of them, some of us perhaps have, most of the time we tend to say that they are family, like how Kaigeyi says, no, they are family, it's like mother. But when the push comes to shove, they are just a maid. How many of us, Catherine Socket's Help, the book Help, it talks about a problem of separate latrines for the black women in the 1960s America. It will not even come, we won't even bat an eyelid. No, in newspapers it comes. That separate entrance for the servants, for the flats, separate bathroom for the servants. How many of our servants can use the dining table? How many of them sit and eat at the floor in a separate plate? And we are supposed to be the liberal, modernistic society, right? So I am raising this kind of points through the Mantra story. So I believe the art has to do that, the literature has to do that. Not perhaps a question to be answered by a writer who is writing mythology, but I believe the mythology or Purana is relevant only if we address the problem. That is why Asura has a character called Bhadra, the common man. And Asura is told not just from the viewpoint of Ravan, but through the viewpoint of Bhadra also.
I completely agree with you that when we revisit the mythologies and the old stories, we have to find a relevance to our contemporary lives. And there is, whether we like it or not, a political charge to the point of view that we are taking. And that's why in India, we are surrounded by these stories and they keep adapting to the needs of the day. So Koral, I want to look at your series on the Panchakanya. And 2 books in the series are already available, Ahalya and Kunti. Great stories again, but the way you have presented them, they seem to highlight the woman's choice, or at least raise questions about female desire and sexuality. That's a very engaging aspect of, for instance, the book on Ahalya. We all remember the story of Ahalya, how she was visited by the god Indra in the guise of her husband. And there was a relationship. Gautam, the husband, cursed Ahalya, who then becomes a stone. And much later, she's released of that petrified situation by the touch of Rama. Now, when you look at Ahalya's story, you've put in that great puzzle as to whether Ahalya, when she was with Indra, knew that it was not her husband's body, knew that it was actually another person, the god Indra, that she was actually attracted to that person. And that puzzle is the core of that relationship between Ahalya and Gautam that you have developed at great length. So your insights on that story and how you came to the focus on female desire.
Thank you, Malashri, and hello, everybody. I grew up thinking that our religion, our culture prefers women who are timid, who should be obedient, who should follow a particular decorum of existence. When I was small, I would read the Bengali translations of Ramayana and Mahabharata. We had fat books. I still have, again and again. And I don't know whether I was reading them again and again because the stories unsettled me, or maybe I was just fascinated with the concept of Shiva and Kali and Krishna. But as I grew up and I got into that thinking space, I very strongly felt that mythological stories are very deep into metaphors, and most of the, even a Ram is a metaphor, a Sita is a metaphor. Everything has a very strong philosophical meaning to it. So now when I started looking at these stories, I figured that mythology doesn't necessarily seek timid, obedient women, or it doesn't even try to profile women in a particular way. For mythology, it is Purusha and Prakriti. It is not masculine and feminine. Masculine and feminine are certain terms that has come into our gender perspectives later. And for centuries, the stories had been told to us in a way which projects the stories in a particular way. The way I heard Ahalya stories when I was small. Kunti's stories was not even told to me because I felt that Kunti is far more fierce than Draupadi. So it's probably the storytellers felt that it's better that females don't hear or understand too much of Kunti. Being a princess from earth, she desired the prince or the king of heaven to have her children. She was that level ambitious. And when I was writing Kunti, I had many times been asked, how are you showing Kunti? Is she the manipulative one or the mother? So I had to just tell them that I think Kunti was very ambitious. So getting Kunti out from that the word manipulative definition to the ambitious definition was quite a task. Similarly for Ahalya, I figured that Indra, the word can be an extension of Indriya, which is your senses. And that is what women have always done. So the way I saw Ahalya's story was very different, that she invoked Indra in her husband Gautama. So it was not Indra coming in, but Indra possessing Gautama, and there being the entire confusion. And Ira was also talking about Krishna, the concept of Krishna. So Rama coming and touching Ahalya was something that I had seen. Rama or Krishna or Vishnu is that aspect of mythology, which is the supreme being, right? Your inner existence, your supreme being. So if you see Rama or Krishna, they are actually you, the way you see, and you are the biggest politician. So is Krishna. So Rama coming and touching Ahalya, the way I saw, was not a man coming and giving freedom to a woman. It was the woman turning inwards as a stone. Your response to the outer world ceases and you grow inwards, because a stone cannot react. So you obviously turn inwards, and it takes many years to come and find yourself. And finding yourself is the liberation. That is Rama's touch.
Very well put indeed, because quite often it's also a game of vocabulary. As you said, from calling a woman manipulative to calling her ambitious, that in itself shifts the power game to the woman being more in control of her choices rather than being gazed at by a male patriarchal tradition and being labeled in one way or another. So let me turn to one of the important male characters in epics, Arjun, the supreme male. And the section Ira I'm referring to is the Brihannala sections of the story. That Arjun as Brihannala actually takes on a cross-gendered identity. And there is a lot of speculation as to what this cross-gender is actually. Is it only in garment? Is it in body? Is it in psychology, emotions? What is it? But you've extended it even further and taken it to a situation where there is a fishing community. And therefore, you're bringing in, like Anand has, the marginal people in the story into the center of the narratives that you're recreating. So if you were to look at that Brihanala episode the way you've presented it, it's Arjun almost manipulating a kind of a marriage alliance with the fishing community, which interestingly presages the continuity of the kingdom through a child who is not only of royal blood, but also of fishing community blood, which is considered to be of another order altogether. So how conscious was this plotting, and what was your philosophy behind it?
Thank you, Malashri, for that. And may I point out that I'm answering all the male-oriented questions here. So that was an interesting episode. This whole question of Arjun being able to pass off as a woman, it was something which interested me. I was wondering if I should go down the route of, gender fluidity. What were they trying to say? But then in keeping with my overall sort of philosophy of presenting the Mahabharata through the eyes of women with a possibly plausible storyline so that these events could have happened. I decided to see it through Draupadi's eyes. And the way that she would have seen it was that right from the beginning, she's very resentful of, as you all know, it is a year in which the Pandavas have to remain in disguise, all of them, and Draupadi as well. And Arjun, out of all of them, chooses to go as a dance instructor, as a woman dance instructor, into the house, into the gated, into the parda, if you like, of King Virat. And Draupadi is extremely suspicious and resentful of this way in which Arjun presents himself. And she begins to realize that this is just a way for him to get into the inner quarters of these women so that they are terribly compromised at the end of the year when he comes out as this great warrior, as this great Kshatriya prince. Their father Virat is really absolutely aghast and devastated because the honor of his daughters have been ruined by living in close proximity to a man, even if he has been in disguise. So this is the sort of way in which I wanted to interpret this episode, because as Malashri was saying, and my co-panelists also, is that you must remember that in the Mahabharata, there's a great othering of anybody who is not Kshatriya or Brahmin. It is really the episodes swirl and coalesce around this identity of Kshatriyahood and Brahminhood. The Brahmins are driving this narrative of Kshatriyahood. Anybody who falls outside this very narrow definition of upper caste, Brahminical sort of patriarchy, is seen as almost beyond human. As my co-panelist was saying, when they want to establish Indraprastha, they just go ahead and destroy Khandav forest, the people, the tribal folk, the animals, the forest. This is, the men are not even considered worthy warriors. They are just massacred. So anybody who falls outside this narrow definition of Kshatriyahood is not given the same, let us say, the code of honor that is given to another Kshatriya. So they are massacred. Similarly, Hidimbi is treated also in a very cavalier manner when she gives birth to Ghatotkacha. Now, all the people who fall outside the Kshatriya fold are not given the same sort of standard. So this was something that I wanted to show, even with the kingdom of Matsya, is that Arjun goes into this situation. He takes on this, this disguise as a dance instructor, because he has this greater aim later on to shame these princesses so that they marry his son. And it falls within their thinking of anybody who is other being somehow not deserving of the same respect that the Kshatriyas and Brahmins were.
I'm glad you're highlighting that part of the story and taking that position, that it's a willful act of bringing about a little more open thinking in society of that time. Anand, I'm going to ask you about the visual impact of stories from the epic, particularly the women. The reason being that when we read a narrative, we imagine the women, whether it is Taraka Rakshashi or Manthara or Sita, whom you call Bhumija, in your recent book. You also recreated and presented Shanta, the sister of Ram, that we hear very little about normally. Now, when these figures are turned to film or theater or visual or performative arts, then quite often the so-called evil characters, like the Rakshashis, etc., are depicted with physical deformities. And the
Not
good
just physical
women,
deformities, they are usually given a black skin color.
yes, yes. So if you were to put in a script version of the Valmiki's women, what would you do with presenting these women?
I have given, actually, I'm a more of a screenplay writer than a novelist. Even though nobody cares who writes screenplays, especially for television, more than 400 hours of screenplay for Siya Ke Ram, Mahabali Hanuman, a lot of mythological thing. Television is to blame, especially the Ramayana saga is Ramayana which started it. For the perspective, Shurpanakha means she has to be black-skinned. She should have big, what you call, canine teeth. And she will have to go on laughing like some parliamentarians for hours. That laughter has to come. Then only it's a stereotyping, and forget that. What is the meaning of Krishna? There are 3 Krishnas in Mahabharata. There are more, of course, but mainly 3 Krishnas. One is Krishna Devayana Vyasa, then is Draupadi, and the other one is the politician Krishna, right? All the 3 are black in color. Krishna itself means black in color. And how does the Krishna of television appear? That he has fallen in butter? He looks like that. How does Draupadi appear? We cannot even show. This is a country where we sell Fair and Lovely in tons, right? So from where did this come from? Even the deposition of Sita has a lot to do with the Sita of Valmiki. I keep telling it in many places. Sita of Valmiki is not the Sita of Kambar, is not the Sita of Tulsidas. The present deposition of Sita is Tulsidas ji's Sita. The Valmiki Sita, with all due respect, I am going to be eaten up by most of you and these ladies also, is the strongest woman and not Draupadi. Draupadi is perhaps the weakest woman in Indian mythology, is what I will say. I am going to be beaten up for that. I will tell you the reason also. I just wanted to prep up this talk also, so I wanted to become like a debate involving all of you. Instead of question and answer session, it is beautiful to answer questions, but it's fun. Not on Q&A, I'm telling here. I want you to. So that's why I'm provoking you. I'm making a statement here, and I'll tell you the reason, then I'll pass on the mic. First of all, Tulsidas ji Sita, 2 words about her. He wrote it in an era where the Gangetic belt was under Islamic rule. I have nothing against Islam or for Islam or anything like that. But what happens is, whenever you are writing, whatever you are writing, it is influenced by the period and the society in which you are living. From where did we have this obsession of white skin? When the white men started ruling us. That suddenly white skin became superior, Aryan, Dravidian, all kind of theories came. Most of our gods are black, but suddenly everyone we have started showing them as white skinned and the Asuras as black. Whereas in mythology, it's the other way around. Ravan is Arage Ravan, the beautiful, the handsome Ravan. And Rama is, I'm not saying black is not bad or anything, but Ravan and Mandodari are considered much more perfect in Ramayana itself. So Tulsidas ji Sita is a 16th century, 15th century Sita of the rulers which he saw, the women. So she is not the Valmiki Sita. So she covers her hair. Which Indian sculpture before the Islamic era has the women covering their hair, let alone the upper body? All the sculptures are naked in the upper body because it's a tropical country we are living. You take all the temples, wherever the temples are left, from 1000th century, 1800th century, see the paintings of Ajanta Ellora. The dress itself changed. And what kind of Sita we see? Even in the culture, it is influenced. When you go to a temple in the north, you cover the hair, right? I'm not saying it's good or right or wrong. I'm just pointing out the cultural impact, how it has influenced. You go to Guruvayur, when Sale Singh had come there as a president, he couldn't enter because he was supposed to remove his turban. You are not supposed to cover male or female. So Sri Lankan president can come in, not Indian president. Because you are not supposed, the women are not supposed to cover your hair. Up to 50, 60 years back, 70 years back, women were not supposed to cover their upper part also. And men are still not allowed to cover the upper part. This same India, right? So what is the culture change, the way in which women have been deposited changed thanks to the history. When Ramayana Sagar took it, it was more or less influenced by Tulsidas Ramayana. So there is no festival of Dasara in the south. There the Dasara is something else. Deepavali is something else. Deepavali is Krishna killing Naragasura. Dasara is about, in Kerala it is about Saraswati Puja. In other parts it is about Durga, in Bengal and all. Lynching of Ravan is a typical Gangetic era phenomena. Why? Because Ravan was at that time depicted as the symbol of the ruler. In Kerala, we lynch someone else. We lynch a Santa Claus kind of figure during New Year. Why? Because he's not Santa Claus, but it looks like Santa Claus. For 500 years in Fort Cochin Beach, they lynch it exactly like same way the Ravan is lynched. Why? Because Portuguese had come and done a lot of atrocities. So that is how a society reacts. So even the deposition of women in the current era, it has got a lot to do with how the TV deposited, and how the TV deposited, it followed more or less the Tulsidasji's Ramayana. And that is why this misconception of Sita is a very demure. Sita is not demure at all. She is the most independent woman of all possible. If you are discussing it further, I will come to that. Thank you.
Anand, as he says, he's challenging all the people here. So you want to take that up? My question to you has to do with something similar. You've chosen the Panchakanya for depiction of this in the series. Why are they called Panchakanya? Because the whole connotation of the word Kanya seems to have changed in the selection of these 5 women that we have in our epical literature.
Thank you, Malashri, for that question. Panchkanya has been, the very term has been translated as 5 virgins. And this translation, obviously, I haven't done. It has been done by very senior scholars. So obviously, as you understand that 5 virgins, Ahalya, Kunti, Draupadi, Mandodari, and Tara. Now, Mandodari and Tara, you may not know enough. But Ahalya, Kunti, and Draupadi, everybody knows, right? So it was obviously a very, very interesting and intriguing question to me as well, that why would someone call Kunti or Draupadi or even Ahalya a virgin? And that is where I actually dived in to figure that Hindu philosophy, not religion, Hindu philosophy doesn't put any kind of emphasis on the body. Philosophy as a whole, not just Hindu, any. Philosophy considers something much bigger and something which is universal. So the body is just the temporary home of the soul as long as you are on earth. So once you die, you are out of the earth, and the universe becomes the home of the soul. So philosophy will not give any importance to the body. It knows that it will be born, it will spend a particular period of time, it will decay. So virginity, for that matter, and I come from Bengal, so the word Sati series, as we call this Panchakanya series, and it was decided with some kind of sarcasm, because Sati is a completely different politics in India, and I come from Bengal. In Sati, the word is a very strong political word in Bengal, and so is it in Rajasthan, where I am right now. So the entire women's purity narrative has come from somewhere where the definition has been completely altered. In philosophy, in mythology, which was written so many years ago, we called women like Kunti and Draupadi and Tara and Mandodari and Ahalya, all of whom had partners other than their husbands. And still we called them Sati, we called them Kanya, because of the virginity of their souls, because of their single-mindedness, strict goal setting that they had, and like today's age, where so many things are distracting us constantly, these were not the women who would get distracted because the need of the hour was something else, or not even need. The call of the hour was something else. Someone wanted something else. Like if you read Kunti, you will figure that Kunti very quickly understands that what Bhishma is up to. Who is Bhishma for Kunti? The man who brought 3 women, who abducted 3 women from their swayamvars, and the result of bringing those 3 women were the birth of 3 children. One, Dhritarashtra, who was blind. Second, Pandu, who was pale. And third, Vidur, who was extremely intelligent, but not considered royalty. So Bhishma was capable of that. And he would follow the orders as long as he believes that it benefits the royalty. Kunti was quick to assess that. And she knew what to do for herself and her little family, which was revolved around Pandu and Madri, Pandu's other wife. So the entire virginity narrative I found was something that had traveled across the patriarchal retelling of the stories, where someone or some century or some society was trying to tell the women that you were supposed to behave like this. And see, when the stories are being told like this, so for example, the first thing that in India, the first stories that are told to the children in India mainly are the stories of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, right? And in these stories, the way they are told, not in mythology, the way they are told to us, the way we heard us as children, was where great heroes, Bhishma, Krishna, Rama, Arjun, Karna, doing great job, warfare, bravery. And somewhere in the corner, women are appearing, they are doing something or the other, but their foolishness is, I know you are up to something. Their foolishness is causing great war.
I have a question.
Hold on. So their foolishness is causing war, right? So the way the stories are told to you, you see that, okay, there is a problem. There are great heroes and there are these problem creators, कुछ ना कुछ उल्टा सीधा कर रहे हैं, जिसके वजह से war हो रहा है, लोग मर रहे हैं. So there is a problem and there must be a solution to every problem. What is the solution? Correct the woman. So we have been correcting the woman. Don't go out, dress properly, sit properly, don't talk too much. Anand is thinking about that. Why is this woman talking too much? Oh.
So we have.
I am cornered by all the women. They are not allowing me to talk. Actually, they are telling.
I just said that if you are attacked, the women will protect you. And he said, this is the narrative change.
I just have one question. My Q&A. I'm starting from my Q&A before giving to them. Small question. When it comes to other man's wife, Gautam's wife, Ram says to Ahalya, he protects Ahalya, he brings her up. When it comes to his own wife, he wants Agni Pariksha. Is it a representation of Maryada Purushottam? This is how an ideal man should be?
My Mandodari is yet to come, so I will not break too much of it. But the way I see Agni Pariksha, I am not justifying Agni Pariksha. I see Agni Pariksha as the fire of doubt.
No, I am not philosophizing. I am asking a very simple question.
That is the work that I am doing. Your storytelling is a little different from mine.
No, when it comes to Gautam's wife, he says Gautam's wife Ahalya had slept with Indra and Ram redeems her. But when it comes to his own wife, isn't there a hypocrisy there is what I am asking.
Maybe that's why
Anand,
we'll wait for the next
one.
Okay.
In my storytelling, Rama or Krishna, I don't see them as man at all.
Convenient.
Proper.
Let's get.
I just wanted to add to this very interesting point that Koral made, that a lot of these stories are not as innocent as they seem because they used to over-socialize women in India. Like she was saying herself, growing up, she heard these stories. And I have one word for our co-panelist Anand here, Lakshman Rekha. The Lakshman Rekha is used time and time again. Now, Sita may not have been the sort of unidimensional character that she's portrayed to be. We need to look at her complexity. But we are told in the 21st century, college-going women were told by a politician, if you have trouble in your hostel, it's because you are disobeying the Lakshman Rekha, you're going out at night, God knows dressed how, in the 21st century. So we need to reassess things which were told to us as cautionary tales from the time we are children. You know, don't laugh as loudly. Look at what happened to Draupadi when she laughed. Don't dress a certain way. Don't step outside the constraints of society. So philosophy is all very well, but in the day-to-day real world, we are told from the time we are born, Kanya Puja, that the pre-pubertal girls are pure. What happens to you when you start menstruating? You become impure. You are somebody who is not worthy of the same affection and respect. So remember that, philosophy is on one realm, but the day-to-day lives of ordinary women are ruled by these ancient stories, and we do need to look at them again.
That's a good point at which to turn to our very participative audience. We have a few minutes to take quick, brief questions. And please address a particular panelist, and you have exactly 30 seconds to tell your question. Who's first? Go ahead.
Thank you so much for giving me this chance. Obviously, I love this entire discussion. This question is for Anand, sir. So obviously, we have been talking about how women have been both policed, and in today's time, this mythology could help understand women regain their empowerment. But what about men? They definitely need lessons in today's time. They definitely need to be taught about how to behave with women. So does Valmiki's men or Tulsidas men or Vyas men have anything that could teach how to behave in the modern time?
How not to behave is a better answer. You come home. I'm telling you an example. You come home and find that a 5-year-old boy is standing at the door. Okay. He says that, please don't enter. I am your wife's son. Please don't enter. Wife is taking bath. How will you behave? No, forget there is no police, no IPC, nothing. How will you behave as a human being? You come home and you find a 5-year-old boy, stranger, cute boy. Will you cut off his head and go and find, even if you know plastic surgery, will you find an elephant and bring? So this how not to work, how not to be is one of the answers. Or you can philosophize. Because that is convenient. Even Krishna philosophizes it, right? Because he says, it is not your uncle, just kill. He is just Atma. Why are you worried? If I put it in a layman's term. I hope I answered you.
Okay, another question there. Thank you, Anand. Another question?
I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I am Asura.
Input.
Don't take me seriously.
Yes, Anand, so why is Draupadi more weaker when compared to Sita? Why is Sita more powerful?
Sita is a woman of choice. Quickly, I will tell. Sita is not Tulsidas Sita, Valmiki Sita, I am telling. She is the postmodern woman. She is a model for the woman, not the demure Sita, what the TV serials, which I got a lot of money, so I also wrote. But that is not the Sita, actual Sita. It is Sita's choice to go with Ram to the forest. Urmila is not an ideal woman at all. Husband says, don't come out. She says she sits at home for 13 years. She doesn't sleep. A lot of versions are there. Forget about that. She doesn't go. Sita says, I will come. Her answer is in every Ramayana, Sita has gone with Ram. So why not in this Ramayana? Cyclic nature of Ramayana. And quickly going through because there is no time. Others also have to answer. There is no Lakshman Rekha in Valmiki Ramayana. Other Ramayans are there. There are plenty of Ramayans. Sita chooses to give the arms to defying Lakshman or others. It is her choice. When Hanuman comes to Sita and says that I can take you back, the Hanuman can take the entire army of Ram. Is that powerful? I don't know why they build the bridge and trouble the squirrel. Whatever it is, he is capable of taking Sita. Sita says, let Ram come and take me. It is her choice. First Agni Pariksha, Ram says, you can go anywhere you want. I have redeemed my honor. That's what he says, exact Valmiki Ramayana words. It is her choice to do the Agni Pariksha there. In the last, when Ram abandons her, she doesn't give up. What is the best revenge? She brings up her children. One child she herself makes. She brings up the child, make them so powerful that they defeat the entire Ram's army. And then when Ram asks for Agni Pariksha, that time she chooses not to go with him. She's the world's first single mother. Compare it with Draupadi. She gets stripped. She gets spawned. And what does he say? She gives a lot of TV dramatic dialogue. I will not tie my hair. Who cares whether you tie your hair or not? I won't tie the hair. I will use blood to wash, no shampoo. All these things she says. And finally what happens? The entire war, so many people die, lakhs of people die, and her own children die. Her revenge is a very negative revenge. Nobody wins in the war. Finally, whatever you say. Finally, after the war, what happens? They say Dharma is established, but Kali Yuga comes. So, was it Dharma which won? If it was Dharma won, Satya Yuga should have come. No. After the right has won over the wrong, The dark age comes. Yeah, what is this? So that is the result of it. So that's why Draupadi is weak. Thank you.
Okay, I think Draupadi needs her defense from Ira Mukhoty.
Well, it'll be difficult to match that colorful language, but the way in which I saw it, like I was saying early on, is that we are presented a very over-socialized version of womanhood in India. And Draupadi begins her journey just like that. She is a woman absolutely bolstered by the men in her life. She is very proud. She is the queen. She is the daughter of a famous king, King Draupadi. She has a twin brother, Dhritarashtra. She has many other siblings. She has 5 husbands. She has 5 sons. So she is somebody who comes from within the patriarchy. She is somebody she feels that she is untouchable. She is somebody who is protected by all these things in her life. And yet her journey is remarkable, just like any woman living today. She sees that all these men let her down. She has been promised protection by all these men, being a Kshatriya woman, but they let her down. And there's a very, sort of dismal phrase that describes her, which is Nathavati Anathavat, which means she is husbanded yet unprotected. And this is something she comes to realize, that no man in her life, no husband, no son, no father, no brother is going to protect her. She's going to protect herself. And she uses a very powerful symbolism. She uses her open hair to symbolize blood. And blood related to women is a very powerful thing in India. It is considered polluting. But she claims the value of that blood. She claims the cleansing value of that blood. And she says she will have revenge. So whether or not it leads to a youth, my point is that she makes this journey in her life and claims the very symbols that were oppressing her and her anger, which is a fiery and dangerous thing in women. She uses anger and blood to get justice.
Thank you very much. There's been a vibrant panel with strong opinions on the women in the epic, and those are the views that we will take. Very strong on both sides, and that leaves all of us thinking about the epic women. Thank you very much.
You stole my mic. She doesn't.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Koral Dasgupta, Ira Mukoti, Anand Neelakantan, and Malashri Lal for a fabulous session. And we'd also like to thank Sakal Media Group for their support. They sponsored this session. All of them will be signing their books. So grab your copies and write. On the left, we've got the 10 book signing 10. They'll be there.
From my book, English Language.